We've just come back from looking at the Battle of Culloden, which is essentially a battle that happened in Scotland. But as you can imagine, me being interested in sport, I started to veer away from the battle. Yes, I was still paying attention to all of the stories and what was going on, but I started to think about a problem that I had this morning. I was trying to find either a replay or recording or live stream of a trampoline cup that's going on at the moment. You might be wondering, where in the world is the crossover? Well, when I think about sports, I think about the Olympics, I think about minority sports. I don't really see them on TV or see them streamed anywhere that I can find during the Olympics or during World Championships or some sort of cycle, but the smaller competitions, such as the World Cups and things like that, seem to be well hidden. And if I wasn't in Scotland and we weren't with the family and looking for different places to go and walks to go on and events to see, I wouldn't really have found the Battle of Culloden and learned about all of the stories, all of the things that happened there, and some of the relations between Outlander, the TV series, and this location, which was essentially just a field with rocks on. I recognise the rocks are gravestones, and there is a lot of story, a lot of emotion, a lot of politics that goes on with that, but the face of it, it's just a field with rocks. And when you look at sport, football, rugby, or whatever popular sport it is, at the end of the day, it's people trying to beat other people at a game. And on the face of it, the game isn't really that exciting. I mean, I'm going to be watching the Euros later, and some of the games that most of the games England have played, are pretty boring to watch. So why in the world am I interested in watching the Euros? Why in the world are we interested in watching sport, professional sport? Those of us interested, of course. Which relates to why we are interested in this grass filled with rocks on. It's not the physical thing, it's not the grass and the rocks and the leaves, but what it represents, what happened in the past, and the stories related to that. So, the two sides of the battle, the stories building up to the battle, the day of the battle, what happened before the battle, the fact that they walked 20 miles in one direction, didn't go anywhere, came back, they'd been starving for 3 days, and then they went to fight the English who had far more numbers, and crazy situation. And when I think about the main sports we see on TV, we follow a team, we follow a group, we follow people, we follow storylines. You've got the rivalries between popular teams, the battles to try and avoid relegation or to win the league or win the cup. And with a lot of the team sports, you don't really need to know who's playing or who's in charge or the support team. It's just, I am from this location, Liverpool, Manchester, London or whatever, and I'm going to support them. Or maybe you're not even from there and you just support that group or that team for some reason. What I'm going to categorise as minority sports don't seem to have this ability to tell a story, to support a story, to live stream and show and share these stories. Boxing fights, boxing matches, they are two people, but grab loads of attention because of the story that that fight holds. In trampoline, my sport of interest, there isn't a fight. It's not a one versus another. There's a final, there's 8 people in a final that compete, but it's very hard to find a storyline unless you know someone that's competing or you're supporting someone, like in the Olympics. Great Britain have someone competing, so I'm going to support them because I am from Great Britain and I want to support them. But I'm also going to support people that I know of. So for example, online I've seen some of the people competing that are training to go to the Olympics. I'm going to be supporting and want to support them going up. Another story inside of trampoline, at least, is Dong Dong. He competed and did really, really well on the world stage. So it's following the top level competitor, or following the storyline of someone training coming back from injury, or following my local area, Great Britain, local area. But I'm in the sport, I'm interested in the sport. If you don't know anything about the sport, or you don't know any of the storylines or any of the areas, it's literally just, I support GB because Olympics, and that's it. 4 years later, I'll support them again, but there's nothing else. And that's why I think a lot of the minority sports struggle to really gain traction for the live streaming, for the replay, because there's no story to tell. My recent interest in jiu-jitsu didn't spur from jiu-jitsu and fighting and MMA and martial arts and all that being really interesting, because to me it's not. But what is interesting is learning about the stories of some of the fighters and learning about how they are developing their skills, taking an ecological approach. For those curious, standard jiu-jitsu and Greg Souders and his coaching approach. And this gets me thinking about Gotham Chess, or Levi Rosman, whatever you know him by, potentially on YouTube. He started talking about chess because that was his sport of interest. And publicly, and when you look at the way chess is run as a sport, as media, all the rest of it, it's not great. But I follow chess, I know of chess, I've known chess for a while. But it wasn't until Gotham Chess started talking about it, explaining the rules, explaining what happens at high-level chess, because it's not that fun waiting 10 minutes for someone to make a move. You have no understanding of why that's a good move. But hearing his experience as a supporter makes me more interested, which makes me wonder, maybe instead of there being mainstream showcases, mainstream documentation, or videos and replays and commentary of the sport, minority sports would be better off using ambassadors and enthusiastic people engaged in the sport, whether they be athletes or just observers or community members or coaches, those sorts of people sharing the sport. And then relating that to what I was talking about a couple of days ago about communities of practice, the communities of practice then become the community that sort of shares the sport, shares the minority sport, and builds up those storylines, because you now got maybe 2 or 3 ambassadors going to a competition. Maybe a rivalry appears, or maybe you just want to see 2 individuals developing together alongside one another, competing against each other or competing with each other. In trampoline, you've got the individual, so individual, obviously you do your routine, you get your tariff, you get your whatever, but you've also got synchro, so maybe you have 2 people that you've watched develop and they decide to do a synchro together. I don't think minority sports are going to get TV licenses and go stream on Sky Sports or anything like that, so there needs to be another way for them to be promoted. Chess obviously are growing and have been growing since, The Queen's Gambit on Netflix. But I don't think every minority sport is going to get a hit series on Netflix, so how else do we do it? Well, ambassadors. People like Gotham Chess doing it in chess, people like Greg Souders doing it in jiu-jitsu and some of his athletes, as well as other people in that world, but I'm interested in the coaching side, which is why I picked Greg Souders. But then other people like Magnus Mitbo in climbing. I'm interested in their stories as individual athletes, potentially have retired and getting back into it, or coaches that are developing their abilities to coach the sport, to show interest in the sport. It's just sharing what the sport is, experiences, the stories, and that's what the Battle at Culloden got me thinking about today, is the stories of the minority people in those, the minority sports, the people in the minority sports talking about them. Maybe this is just me, but that's an interesting thought. It's something I've been thinking about today, and how I do that potentially for trampoline. Now, for people that have watched this far, what I would love you to do is just share individual athletes or ambassadors of sports that you're interested in down in the comment section below so I can have a look, because finding these people is difficult, because you can see a couple of videos here and there, but finding someone that's an ambassador of a sport that continuously talks about the sport, explains their experiences of the sport, and is in the sport, is hard to find from my experience at least.